Well, you might be surprised to finally find a video from this channel after so long. But it's the end of the year, and while we haven't had a lot going on this year, we want to keep the tradition going of sharing our top 10 albums of 2018. So in this video, you'll be seeing my personal top 10 picks of the year. Now, a few rules with these lists is that obviously it has to be an album from the year 2018. Normally in the past it would just be albums that we've reviewed, but I mean, since there hasn't been a lot of activity this year, what we're going to do is include albums that we have reviewed, but also ones that we have listened to throughout this year. So you'll be seeing ones on each of these lists that we haven't actually reviewed, but I mean, we're going to touch upon these albums, you know, briefly in this video. So those are the requirements for the top 10 list this year. Nobody knows each of our top 10s up until this point. Sam's sitting right by there. He doesn't know mine, I don't know his, so these are going to come as surprises. He might react to some of my picks, I'll probably react to some of his. I welcome that. We're starting off with number 10. Number 10 is Misery by the Amity Affliction. You know, this is a band that has been growing on me a lot over the last few years. Their last album a couple of years ago I thought was excellent. When I first heard Misery, it wasn't the strongest album to me. What they were trying to do is trying to diverse themselves a little bit from what they've done in the past. A lot of their older albums have always like sounded the same. They've always had that notable sound to them. Clean singing, and then you know you have those screaming vocals in there, and you know singing about like pretty touchy subjects. Misery tried to put a lot more electronic stuff in there, and at first I thought it was very strange. It took a while for me to enjoy what they had done, but it was one of the better albums I had heard this year. Not the best, but I think it was worthy of being on this list. So that's my number 10 for this year. Coming in at number 9, we have much better pick. We have Seven Dust's All I See Is War. You want to talk about a band that is incredibly underrated in like the metal and rock scene. Seven Dust is one of those bands. They consistently put out very, very good albums. They might not be the best albums that you've ever heard, but they've always been good. All I See Is War is their first album, I think, in 3 years. What they did really nicely with this album is like they had a very like polished sound to them on this one. They've always, you know, had that notable sound to them, but All I See Is War, you know, on songs like Dirty and Medicated and Not Original, they showcase like how good of a band they are. And I hate that they're overlooked a lot in this scene and they don't get a lot of credit. People should really try to listen to these albums, and All I See Is War, I think was a really solid album this year. So that's my number 9 for 2018. And coming in at number 8, we got Under Oath's Erase Me. This band is one of the most talked about bands throughout my high school days. Like everywhere I went, people were talking about Under Oath. Like, oh, did you hear new Under Oath? Are you gonna go see Under Oath? I never heard of a band mentioned so much. When something's like mentioned to me that much, you know, it's something where I have to backtrack from it and try to get into it in my own time. And Under Oath is one of those bands that I kind of liked, you know, when I was younger. I mean, I liked some of their stuff, but I didn't really see too much of the excitement that people had for them. They took a break for a while. I think they took like a 5-year hiatus, maybe something like that, and they disappeared for a while. But this year was their big comeback, their first album in 8 years. The diehard fans of this band were mad because Erase Me didn't sound anything like what they had done before. It sounded a lot like Chamberlain's other band, I forget the name of it, but it had a lot more electronic stuff to it. They were really trying to be more like a rock band as opposed to like what they were before, like metalcore. They considered themselves like a Christian band. Now they've totally abandoned that, and they're trying to go for more of that rock sound. I wasn't into them too much during their older days, but surprisingly, Erase Me is the album for me that has made me really like them. I thought it was a really solid album. It was different, but I thought it was done really, really well. So that's my number 8 for this year. And now coming in at number 7, we have Parkway Drive's Reverence. Surprise, surprise. Parkway Drive has been a band that I've only been getting into over the last few years. Their last album, Ire, was their really big introduction to their sound. You know, I love that album. I thought their last album was excellent. Reverence, it kind of continues the way Ire was going, but still puts a little bit of a spin on it. Parkway Drive has been a band that's been trying to diversify themselves a little bit throughout the last couple of albums. Ire started that, and then Reverence kind of takes that to another level. People who do like Parkway Drive actually don't like this album. A lot of that is from people who are like kind of stuck in their older days, but I mean, this band is trying to grow. When the first time I heard Reverence, I could tell that that's what they were doing. Pretty solid album. You know, some people I think are not giving it the credit that it deserves, but I mean, I thought it was worthy of being on this list. So that's my number 7 for this year. This pick is going to be a questionable one. Before you shoot me, before I announce this, just please hear me out when I say this pick.
Sam shot first.
Number 6 is Machine Head's Catharsis.
Wow.
Yeah, like, don't click out of this video just yet. While this album does have its problems, it's very, very obvious problems, this has been an album that has caught my attention throughout the year. I've always gone back to it just because of how weird of an album it was from this band. For Catharsis, I really think the good outweighs the bad. The bad is obviously there with like questionable tracks like California Bleeding and Triple Beam with their cringy lyrics and stuff like that. There was a lot on this album I thought was done really well. Like the opening track, Volatile, Catharsis, the title track was amazing. You know, Screaming at the Sun. This album had a majority of it as good, solid songs. It's really not too high on this list because of the bad. And, you know, what's unfortunate is that this album caused, like, the implosion of Machine Head. Like, since that album's been out, caused 2 members of the band to leave, and while Rob Flynn says that, you know, the band is not done, this is just, this era of Machine Head is over, I don't know how likely that is. I don't know how likely it is that we'll see Machine Head again, and it's unfortunate that this album caused that. Like I said, it's been an album that I've been kept going back to over this year. Why I don't want people to, like, you know, shoot me over this is because some people think this is the worst album that's come out this year. And then there are some that find this album to be pretty tolerable. It's been an album that I actually did enjoy this year. So that's my number 6 for 2018. Alright, coming in at number 5, we got Disturbed's Evolution. The anticipation for the last album was one that built a lot of excitement for it because it was their first album after a hiatus. So Immortalize That had that behind it, and I mean, it was a good album overall. Evolution didn't have that behind it. People knew it was coming, but what people didn't know is that Disturbed was going to do a lot more acoustic stuff. I would say about half the album is acoustic, and then half the album, you know, is the very familiar side. The acoustic stuff was the stuff that I was a little bit cautious of, because that one single, Reason to Fight, was like not their best work. You listen to some of the other songs, acoustic songs on there, like Hold On to Memories or like Already Gone. They do those songs really, really well. Like, you hear David Draymond like sing in a way like you had not heard before. I mean, you heard it on their cover of Simon and Garfunkel, but that's what really sparked this change in their style, was because of that single. But overall, I think the album is pretty solid. The one weird thing is that David Draymond kind of wanted this to be their Black Album, which I think is pushing it a little bit. I mean, by that he means he wanted this album to garner to the fans may have not heard the band before and kind of like their gateway into them. But I don't think it really succeeds in like that regard, but it's still a pretty solid album. So that's my number 5 for 2018. Number 4, we got Avatar with Avatar Country. You want to talk about an album that absolutely surprised me this year? This album did. Avatar is a band that I didn't really know a lot about over the last few years. We had one friend of ours that was constantly recommending them to us, and actually the bands that he's recommended, you'll find on this list, Avatar being one of them. Avatar Country was such a huge surprise. I love the concept behind it. You know, I love the heaviness behind it. You know, talking all about a king, but every song on there was just done extremely well. It really made me kick myself for not listening to Avatar more, but if you've never heard of this band, you should give this album a try. This should be your gateway to listening to them. I thought it was done very, very well, and it really surprised me. One of the biggest surprises this year. So that's my number 4. Number 3, we got Breaking Benjamin with Ember. This kind of goes the same thing with Disturbed. The anticipation for the last album was one that was expected because the band had been gone for a long time, and so that's what brought a lot of the good reactions to Dark Before Dawn, was because it was their first album in so long, and the album was done really, really well. Ember didn't have that behind it. People knew it was coming, but it was just a matter of time. Another band that constantly puts out like really good material. Like, it's definitely like simplistic, it's definitely mainstream. You sit down and give it a listen, I would say a majority of people would find it to be at least like decent rock at the least. Ember is one, it's short. The problem with it is a short album. I thought a lot of the stuff was done pretty well. It was one that I definitely went back to throughout the year. These ones that are higher up on my list are the ones that I constantly went back to throughout the year and just wanted to keep listening to. They put out another decent album, with all new members of the band, the second album with those new members. So that's my number 3 for this year. Getting into the last 2 here for the year. Number 2, another surprise album that I actually did not expect to be this good. And that album is Ghosts Prequel. Holy shit, what a surprise this album was. I did not expect it to be this good. Ghost is another band we had, recommended from a friend, constantly throughout the years, Give this band a listen. A band that's had a huge rise in popularity over the last few years. Because of that popularity, it's another one of those things where, like, I had to get into it in my own time. Because, people were talking about it so much, and I just had to back away from it. This album, I did not expect to be this amazing. It is so solid from start to finish. Like, I couldn't believe how good they sounded. Like, with the singles Rats, Dance Macabre, and like the whole like concept behind it too, about like, the bubonic plague. It's conflicting like elements of it, of like love and death and all this other stuff. It's really, really good. I think this is an album, people who don't know the band, like myself at one point, should start with, and you'll be very surprised with the results. This is a great album this year. That's why it's number 2. Down to the last one here. What could be my number 1 album for this year?
Andrew WK.
Hell no. That was the worst album this year. The number 1 album has been in front of you the entire time. Light the Torch with Revival. This band had to undergo a lot of change. They had to change their name from Devil You Know to Light the Torch. What they wanted to do with that change is they didn't only want to change the name, but they wanted to change up the style of it a little bit. So we all know that Howard Jones, formerly of Killswitch Engage, is the singer of this band. And, the last 2 Devil You Know albums, was very aggressive, very heavy, a lot of screaming on there. But with Light the Torch, what they wanted to do is they wanted to focus a lot more on the melodic side. And you want to talk about an album that I couldn't stop listening to throughout the year. From when it came out in April to now, I have listened to it so many times, and I couldn't believe how good this album is from start to finish. We got that first glimpse of it earlier in the year with Die Alone, and that was a really surprising one, really good track on that one. And then we got Calm Before the Storm, the other single, also done really, really well. But you listen to some other songs on there, like The Bitter End, The Great Divide, Raise the Dead. Every song is solid. That's the one album this year where I thought every single song nothing was wrong with it. Some people argue, well, that we're fans from the beginning of Devil You Know, they're kind of like subjective to the change that they did. But I mean, if they're changing the name of the band, you might as well like change up the style a little bit. They still maintain their identity because obviously Howard Jones has such a recognizable voice, so it's hard to do that. I think with what they had to work with, they did it really, really well, and I look forward to the next album that they do. So I've shared my 10. It's out there now. People know. What are your top 10 albums of 2018? Be sure to share those in the comment section below. Don't forget to check out Sam's top 10 of this year as well. One thing we promise is that we're going to try to get a lot more content out in 2019. We don't have like conflicting schedules as much as we did throughout this year, which was the main reason why there wasn't a lot. But we're going to change that in 2019, or we're going to try to change that anyway. Hope you enjoyed the music that 2018 brought. We'll see you next year in 2019.